let's move on to it then. At one point, it looked as this was going to be the main talking point for the entire week, actually. Takefusa Kubo, Real Sociedad winger, of course. There was a report out of Japan earlier on the week from Sponichi claiming that Liverpool were in the final stages of negotiations and we were ready to pay a €60 million release clause. There was even talk about a salary being agreed. It was, according to this particular outlet, this particular source over in Japan, it was all but a done deal. Like, he was doing the Axeline and all kinds of stuff. That has died down somewhat. The Athletic came out yesterday and said, according to their sources at Sociedad and Liverpool, those suggestions are dismissed, in so much as it's nowhere near as close as was being suggested over in Japan. However, I mean, your take on it, first and foremost, and also, I assume no one's come out and rebuffed the interest, so that interest may well exist.
It may well exist, yeah. We know Liverpool were offered Anthony Gordon last month, weren't they? And they decided not to pursue that one because they felt they were well stocked. And that's a fair argument, really, when you think of the front line that they've got. You know, obviously, particularly the players who can play on the left side of that front three: Luis Diaz, Diogo Jota, Darwin Núñez, and Cody Gakpo. But the right side is a little bit unbalanced, shall we say. You know, Mo Salah is the undisputed first choice there, and then after that, it's a few square pegs going into round holes there with Harvey Elliott sort of reprising that role that he played when he was a 16-year-old at Fulham. He played there, you know, in the youth ranks, but by and large at Liverpool he's been a central midfielder. You perhaps see Luis Diaz out there, Diogo Jota's played there at times, but they're not sort of ideal solutions to a Mohamed Salah-less Liverpool. So you can see why interest in Kubo is see why Liverpool fans would be quite keen to get a sort of high quality deputy to Mo Salah. But on the flip side, I guess, are Liverpool looking to bolster their front line to the tune of €60 million? That's quite a lot for Liverpool. That would make him sort of Dominic Szoboszlai territory, you know, 4th or 5th most expensive player of all time at Liverpool. And if it's someone who's not necessarily going to be playing every week, that would be an issue, I guess, for Liverpool. It's maybe not a problem for a club like Chelsea or Man City or Man United, but Liverpool generally don't seem to be able to carry too many expensive players who don't play every week. And of course, form and injuries and all the fluctuations around that does change the situation at times. But I just question whether Liverpool would be willing to pay that release clause for someone who, you know, at least for the next 12 months is not going to be first choice. And then it depends on what happens with Mo Salah. So we'll see on that one. But yeah, certainly not as advanced as reports in Japan have been suggesting in recent days. But I did see a clip of Endo. It wasn't translated, but there was a clip of him on Japanese TV, and he's almost suggesting that he'd like Kubo to sign. And that was an interesting one for me, a player being so sort of, you know, outwardly, you know, outspoken in terms of transfer interest for the club. But certainly he'll be a player who knows from the international setup. And I think if Liverpool need a little bit of a recommendation or a character reference, then Endo will be on hand to supply it. But yeah, I think at the moment a little bit jump on the gun, shall we say, on that one. And I'm just not sure whether Liverpool would pay that much for someone who we know is going to come in and not be first choice straight away.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Wataru Endo stuff there. I've seen that as well. I think he actually earmarked him and endorsed him as the Salah successor at some point as well, which was interesting because ultimately, you know, you're right in terms of the money and the finance involved is a hell of a lot for somebody who won't be a starter from day one, absolutely. But we do need to start thinking about, and I'm sure Liverpool are well aware of this, but we do need to start thinking about life after Mo Salah potentially and what happens when that day does come and the potential successor. But I think even in the shorter term, if you like, as well, because we've seen ultimately he broke down once last season in terms of injuries. Obviously, AFCON isn't a thing this time around, but that is a thing sort of perennially, if you like. So I think we do need that backup just to give him a rest as well in certain games. We speak a lot about the amount of football that there is and all that sort of stuff, and you're right. It feels like I've made it publicly known a few times, I don't love Diaz or Jota out that side, if truth be told. I think you go from Salah to a Ben Doak / K Gordon, and the youngsters, the kids, you know what I mean? It's such a leap. It's seismic, really. On the topic of Salah successors then, I've jumped to the next story, actually. Sacha Tavolieri, obviously Belgian journalist, spoke to him a number of times down the years. He was speaking about Johan Bakayoko, of course, of PSV at the moment. And he mentioned interest from elsewhere. He mentioned interest from Bayern Munich, of course, RB Leipzig. But he also mentioned Liverpool's name and claimed that he is still on the list as a potential option. This is one that's been doing, it's been around forever, really, as a potential option for Liverpool to get in. What's your thoughts on it? In terms of the age profile, it ticks a box. In terms of the fee, I think it's a hell of a lot less than that 60 million euros you just muted there. So more to like, I guess.
Yeah, I was keeping an eye on him in the Euros, actually, because obviously those links have been around for the past sort of few months, haven't they, with Bakayoko. Left-footed right winger, got all the traits you'd expect of that profile of player. I think he had a superb season with PSV, didn't he? Won the Eredivisie quite handily, and he was their top scorer, perhaps. So yeah, loads to admire, really. I think Vincent Kompany tried to sign him for Burnley last summer, actually. Didn't quite work out, but he remains interested, and obviously with Bayern Munich, it's a lot easier to get a player to Bayern Munich than it is to Burnley with respect to them. So yeah, there will be interest in him, and you're right, Liverpool will be sort of taking a little bit of a longer term view of what happens in a post-Mo Salah world. But the interesting one with Salah is you mentioned then about some sort of breaking down at the AFCON. He wasn't probably quite the same player he was prior to Christmas. It's when he doesn't start. It's an issue. It's a story, isn't it? Why is Salah not playing? He's injured, and it almost becomes, unbelievable that he might be rested at some stage. I think we'll have to start seeing that change at some stage because he's just turned 32. Obviously, he's still an unbelievable nick, and he's one of the fittest in the squad, as evidenced by him winning the 6 mile run, wasn't it? Sorry, the 6 minute run was it last week or the week before? So I don't know if there's huge concerns that he's going to drop off a cliff in terms of his physical capabilities, but just to prolong his career, he doesn't have to play 90 minutes every week, does he? And he'd obviously like to, but if Liverpool are going to look to rest him and rotate him at certain points, then they will need a sort of adequate backup. Because like you say, the disparity in quality between the first choice and Mo Salah, and then further down when you're asking Harvey Elliott to play out of position, or Ben Doak to come in, or OK Gordon, it's a significant drop-off, isn't it? And that ultimately has a knock-on effect, and you can get away with it in Carabao Cup games and FA Cup, or maybe even Champions League groups if the group stage is looking quite healthy. But if you're doing that in the Premier League when you're trying to really, push on, then that becomes a little bit difficult to achieve. So Liverpool are going to have to take a serious look at a Mo Salah deputy / future replacement at some stage, and that's why you can see links to Kubo, and that's why links to Bakayoko have never really gone away, and Liverpool will have a list there. And you wouldn't be shocked if Bakayoko was on there given the season he's just had, the age and the general profile, like you say. No,
he feels like a real smart fit to me. He's more like for like than some of the others as well, I would have said. He's quite dynamic in the way he operates. Just for what it's worth, 48 appearances last season, 14 goals, 14 assists, so good numbers in the Eredivisie as well. A player on a slot will know well, of course, he'll come up against him a number of times. I always like to use FBref sort of comparable players, and Crysencio Somerville's right to the top of the list. And we know there's been maybe tentative interest in him in the past as well. So definitely lots of Angel Di Maria is in there as well. He'll do for me. Certainly peak Angel Di Maria, for that way. No, but I think you're right, absolutely. Liverpool definitely need to start future planning for what happens next, because obviously not only all the stuff you just mentioned there and the need for more of a rest and prolonging his career and getting the most out of Mo Salah and stuff like that, but the contract situation remains a thing as we speak right now. So Liverpool will be foolish not to be addressing it. Yeah, however you view it, that issue is still there, isn't it? Whether it's a contract situation and Mo Salah leaves in 12 months, or whether it's a prolonging his career and you're getting him well into his mid to late 30s. Either way, something's got to give. Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I like Ben Doak a hell of a lot. Of people will know I like Kay Gordon likewise, but it's just a big old drop off, as I say. It's a long time before they're anywhere near Mo Salah levels. So bridging that gap might be important.